I never thought I would be the sole heir to the estate of my last living relative. Sitting in that mahogany office chair hearing the lawyer announce that I now owned a mansion worth $3 million and $2 million in cash assets was surreal. Grief and shock collided as I processed losing Aunt Eleanor while simultaneously becoming a millionaire overnight. The entire situation felt like a dream until two familiar silhouettes appeared at the door. My parents, who vanished 15 years ago without explanation, suddenly materialized with rehearsed smiles and designer clothes. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever been betrayed by your own family members. The day my parents abandoned me remains crystal clear in my memory. I was 12 years old when Thomas and Julia Adams, my father and mother, told me they needed to take a business trip and would return in a few days. I remember helping my mom pack her favorite blouse, while my dad ruffled my hair, promising to bring back a souvenir. They left our modest suburban home on a Tuesday morning. By Saturday, I'd eaten all the microwavable meals they had left for me. By Monday, I was eating cereal dry because the milk had run out. By Wednesday, our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, noticed I was still alone and called social services. The police investigated but found nothing. No accident reports, no hospital admissions, no bodies. They had simply disappeared, abandoning their only child without a word. I later learned they had emptied their bank accounts the day before they left. Everything had been planned. While the state was determining what to do with me, a woman I had never met arrived at the social services office. She introduced herself as Eleanor Reyes, my maternal aunt. I had never heard my mother mention having a sister, but the social worker confirmed her identity. Aunt Eleanor was tall, with salt and pepper hair despite being only in her 40s. She wore no makeup, simple clothes, and spoke with quiet authority when she said she would take custody of me. The social worker seemed surprised. Apparently, Eleanor lived alone in a coastal mansion 3 hours away, had no experience with children, and had never been married. But she was my only living relative willing to take me in, so, after a brief investigation and some paperwork, I found myself in the back seat of her Mercedes heading to a new life. Aunt Eleanor was not warm or affectionate. She showed me to my room in her sprawling home overlooking the Pacific and explained the house rules plainly. I would attend the local private school. I would maintain good grades. I would keep my space clean. She would provide everything I needed, but not necessarily everything I wanted. Those first few months were awkward. We ate dinner together in silence most nights. She asked about school. I gave short answers. She was not cruel or mean, just distant. I later realized she had no idea how to talk to a traumatized 12-year-old boy. I had no idea how to talk to this stranger who was suddenly responsible for me. The turning point came about 6 months after I moved in. I was having nightmares about my parents waking up calling for my mom. One night, Aunt Eleanor appeared in my doorway, clearly uncomfortable but determined. She sat on the edge of my bed and told me about her own parents, my grandparents, who had died before I was born. She explained how her father had been cold and her mother passive, how my mother had been the favored child, while Eleanor was expected to be practical and responsible. It was the longest conversation we had ever had. From that night on, something shifted between us. She was still not demonstrative or overly nurturing, but she began to take a genuine interest in my life. She attended my school events. She asked thoughtful questions about my friends and interests. She hired tutors when I struggled with subjects and praised my achievements without making a fuss. I learned more about her as the years passed. She had married young to her college sweetheart who died in a boating accident just 2 years into their marriage. She never remarried or had children, focusing instead on building a successful investment portfolio and living a quiet, independent life. She had lost touch with my mother years before I was born due to some family disagreement she refused to elaborate on. On my 16th birthday, Aunt Eleanor gave me a set of car keys and some unexpected words that I would never forget. After handing me the small box containing the keys to a used but reliable Toyota, she said, "Miguel, you are the only family I have left in this world. I know I am not the warmest person, but I am proud of the young man you are becoming." It was the first time I felt like I truly belonged somewhere since my parents left. I promised myself I would never disappoint her. I studied hard, got into a good college on scholarship, and returned home regularly to visit. Aunt Eleanor never said it directly, but I could tell she appreciated my visits. She would stock the refrigerator with my favorite foods and ask detailed questions about my classes and friends. In her own reserved way, she had become more of a parent to me than my biological parents ever were. By the time I graduated college and established myself in a marketing career in a nearby city, Aunt Eleanor was approaching 70. Though still independent and sharp as ever, I noticed she seemed more tired during my monthly visits home. When she finally agreed to see a doctor after weeks of my insistence, the diagnosis was devastating. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. Terminal. I immediately took a leave of absence from work and moved back into the mansion to care for her. At first she protested, valuing her independence and privacy. But as the disease progressed and treatments took their toll, she grudgingly accepted my help. During those difficult months, our relationship deepened in ways I never expected. Confined to her bed or the living room sofa, Aunt Eleanor began to share stories about her life that she had never told me before. She spoke about traveling through Europe in her 20s, about the small publishing house she had owned before switching to investments, about the man she had almost married after her first husband died. She showed me old photographs and family heirlooms, explaining their significance with a wistfulness I had never seen in her before. One evening, as I was adjusting her pillows, she mentioned my parents for the first time in years. "I tried to find them, you know," she said quietly. "After you came to live with me, I hired private investigators. I froze my hands still on the pillow. You did. Why did you never tell me?" She sighed. There was nothing good to tell. The investigators tracked them to Argentina, then Brazil. They were involved in some kind of investment scam. When my investigators made contact, they said they had no interest in coming back or in seeing you. The words stung even after all those years. They were contacted and specifically said they did not want to see me. Aunt Eleanor reached for my hand. "I am sorry, Miguel. I thought it better you build your life without false hope. They chose their path. It had nothing to do with your worth." As her condition worsened, Aunt Eleanor began meeting regularly with her attorney, Mr. Franklin. Sometimes their meetings lasted hours, and she would look exhausted afterward. When I asked what they were discussing, she would only say she was putting her affairs in order. In her final weeks, as hospice nurses came and went, Aunt Eleanor made me promise something. Sitting by her bedside, holding her now frail hand, I listened as she spoke with unexpected intensity. "Miguel, promise me you will live a full and happy life. Promise you will not let bitterness or resentment steal your joy. And most importantly, promise you will use what I leave you to do some good in this world." I promised through tears, not wanting to think about a world without her steady presence. 3 days later, she slipped away peacefully in her sleep, while I dozed in the chair beside her bed. I organized a small, dignified funeral, attended only by a few of her longtime friends, some business associates and neighbors who had known her for decades. A week after the funeral, Mr. Franklin contacted me about the reading of the will. He asked that I come to the mansion, where he would meet me with the necessary paperwork. I arrived early, sitting in the living room where Aunt Eleanor and I had spent so many evenings in comfortable silence. When the doorbell rang, I assumed it was Mr. Franklin. Instead, I opened the door to find two people I barely recognized but instantly knew. My parents, 15 years older but unmistakable. My father had developed a paunch and gray temples, while my mother had clearly had cosmetic work done. Both were expensively dressed, my father sporting a gold watch, my mother draped in designer clothes and jewelry. "Miguel," my mother cried, stepping forward to embrace me. I stood frozen as her unfamiliar perfume enveloped me. "My boy, look how handsome you are." My father clapped me on the shoulder as if we had seen each other last weekend. "Son, good to see you." His voice was exactly as I remembered it from my nightmares. I stepped back, finding my voice at last. "What are you doing here?" Before they could answer, a car pulled into the driveway and Mr. Franklin emerged, his expression changing from professional neutrality to concern when he saw my unexpected visitors. "Ah, Mr. and Mrs. Adams," he said cautiously. "I did not expect you." My mother smiled with artificial warmth. "We heard about poor Eleanor. And of course we had to come support our son during this difficult time." Mr. Franklin glanced at me, then nodded toward the house. "Shall we proceed inside? I have the documents ready." We sat in the formal dining room, my parents choosing seats directly across from me, both wearing expressions of sympathy that made my stomach turn. Mr. Franklin opened his briefcase, methodically removing several folders before clearing his throat. As per the last will and testament of Eleanor Maria Reyes, Mr. Franklin began adjusting his reading glasses. I, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath all my worldly possessions to my nephew Miguel James Adams. My father leaned forward slightly, while my mother reached across the table, as if to take my hand. I pulled back instinctively. Mr. Franklin continued detailing the extent of my inheritance, the mansion valued at $3.5 million, $2 million in cash and securities, her art collection, jewelry, and vehicles. As the list continued, I noticed my parents exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from performed sympathy to poorly concealed excitement. "This is wonderful news during such a sad time," my mother said, her voice dripping with false emotion. "Eleanor always did have excellent taste." My father nodded solemnly. "We are just glad Miguel will be taken care of. As his legal guardians, we can help him manage these assets responsibly." The room went silent. I stared at my father, unable to process his audacity. Mr. Franklin removed his glasses slowly. "Legal guardians, Mr. Adams. Miguel is 27 years old. He does not require guardianship." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Nevertheless, we are his parents. We have his best interests at heart. Given the substantial nature of this inheritance, we feel it would be prudent if we assisted in its management. You abandoned me when I was 12 years old," I finally said, my voice shaking. "You have no right to anything." My mother gasped dramatically. "Abandon Miguel? Sweetheart, is that what Eleanor told you? We were forced to leave because of business problems." "We always intended to come back for you." After 15 years, I asked incredulously. "We had legal troubles," my father interjected smoothly. "Competitors trying to frame us. We had to stay away to protect you. We tried to contact you many times, but Eleanor must have intercepted our letters." Mr. Franklin cleared his throat. "I believe I can address this matter directly." He reached into his briefcase again and removed a thick manila envelope. Miss Reyes anticipated this scenario and prepared accordingly. My parents stared at the envelope, their confident expressions faltering slightly. "Miss Reyes employed private investigators to track your movements over the past 15 years. Mr. Franklin continued, removing several documents from the envelope. "We have extensive documentation of your activities in Argentina, Brazil, and later Mexico. Documentation that includes multiple instances of investment fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion." The color drained from my mother's face. My father's expression hardened. "This is preposterous," he snapped. "You cannot prove any of this." Mr. Franklin laid out several papers, including what appeared to be court documents. "On the contrary, you were tried in absentia in Argentina and found guilty of defrauding investors of approximately $700,000. There are outstanding warrants for your arrest in 3 countries. My mother's artificial composure cracked. "We had nothing to do with that. We were victims ourselves. The evidence suggests otherwise." Mrs. Adams, Mr. Franklin replied calmly. "But more relevant to our current discussion is this." He slid another document across the table. "This is a formal record of child abandonment filed by the state. You left your 12-year-old son alone without proper care or supervision and made no attempt to ensure his well-being. You emptied your bank accounts the day before your departure, indicating premeditation." The room fell silent again. I stared at the document, seeing the official record of the worst day of my life reduced to legal terminology. "Now see here," my father began, his voice taking on a threatening edge. "We came here in good faith to reconnect with our son. These accusations are slanderous. We could sue. You are welcome to pursue that course of action," Mr. Franklin replied. "However, I should inform you that the local authorities have been notified of your presence in this jurisdiction. Given the international warrants, they expressed significant interest." My parents looked at each other, panic flashing between them. My mother turned to me, tears suddenly streaming down her face, smearing her mascara. "Miguel, darling, we are still your parents. Blood is thicker than water. Whatever Eleanor told you about us, we deserve a chance to explain our side. Surely she would want you to share some of your good fortune with your own flesh and blood." Something broke inside me. 15 years of abandonment, confusion, and pain crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I stood up slowly, planting my hands on the table and looking directly at the strangers who had given me life and nothing else. "I do not need your money, and I do not need your explanations," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Years ago, I forgave you. Not because you deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. But I will not allow you to come here and disrespect the memory of the woman who actually raised me." My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "You ungrateful little." Before he could finish, two security personnel I had not noticed before stepped forward from their positions near the door. Mr. Franklin must have anticipated the need for them. Mr. and Mrs. Adams, "I believe it is time for you to leave," Mr. Franklin said firmly. My mother stood, her tactical tears instantly dry. "Fine, but this is not over. We will contest the will. No judge will side with you over your own parents." I did not respond, watching in silence as they were escorted from the room. My father turned at the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "You will regret this, Miguel. That money should be ours. Your precious aunt stole you from us, and now you are stealing what should rightfully come to us." After they were gone, I collapsed back into my chair, my hands shaking with adrenaline. "Are they really going to contest the will?" I asked Mr. Franklin. He smiled slightly the first time I had seen him do so. "They can certainly try." But Miss Reyes was extremely thorough in her preparations. Which brings me to the final portion of her will, a section she asked me to share with you privately. Once we were certain my parents had left the property, Mr. Franklin opened one last folder. "Your aunt added a codicil to her will approximately 6 months ago when her illness was diagnosed as terminal. She suspected that once news of her death became public, your parents might resurface." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Aunt Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "She asked that you read this privately, but also instructed me to explain the final component of your inheritance." I held the envelope, feeling the weight of her final words to me. "In addition to the assets already mentioned," Mr. Franklin continued, "Miss Reyes established a charitable trust in her name with you as the trustee. The Eleanor Reyes Scholarship Fund is endowed with $1 million, specifically earmarked to assist children who have been abandoned, orphaned, or placed in foster care. The mission is to provide educational opportunities they might otherwise never receive." I felt tears threatening. It was so perfectly like her, practical yet deeply meaningful. She believed that what happened to you should not define your future, and she wanted to extend that same opportunity to others in similar circumstances, Mr. Franklin explained gently. "The trust is already established with an advisory board in place. They are simply waiting for your direction as trustee." That evening, alone in the mansion that was now mine, I opened Aunt Eleanor's letter. Her words, precise and unsentimental, as always, told me she had no regrets about taking me in, that I had brought purpose to her life, and that she trusted me to use my inheritance wisely. The final paragraph read, "Family is not always defined by blood, Miguel. Sometimes it is defined by choice, by who chooses to stay when others leave. I chose you, and I never regretted it for a moment." In the months that followed, my parents did attempt to contest the will, hiring aggressive attorneys who made all manner of claims about Aunt Eleanor's mental capacity and undue influence. Thanks to her meticulous planning and Mr. Franklin's expertise, they failed at every turn. Eventually, facing mounting legal bills and the threat of extradition, they disappeared again. I continued my marketing career, but also embraced my role as trustee of the Eleanor Reyes Scholarship Fund. We awarded our first scholarships to 5 deserving students who had overcome circumstances similar to mine. At the award ceremony, I met Jasmine, a brilliant young woman who had spent her teenage years bouncing between foster homes after her mother died of a drug overdose. Despite everything, she had maintained a perfect GPA and earned admission to an Ivy League university. Jasmine and I became friends and later colleagues when I hired her to help run the expanding scholarship foundation. With her input, we developed mentoring programs and summer internships for our scholarship recipients. The work became my passion, a way to honor Aunt Eleanor while transforming my own painful experience into something positive. 3 years after inheriting the mansion, I decided to convert part of it into the foundation headquarters. The formal dining room where my parents had made their demands became a meeting space for the board. Aunt Eleanor's study became my office. And the guest wing was renovated into dormitory-style housing for scholarship recipients who needed summer accommodations while completing internships. Today, 5 years after Aunt Eleanor's passing, the foundation supports 30 students annually. We have expanded to provide emergency assistance for foster families and advocacy for improvements to the foster care system. The investment portfolio Aunt Eleanor, so carefully built, continues to grow, allowing us to help more children each year. I often think about how different my life might have been if my parents had stayed or if Aunt Eleanor had not taken me in. What began as the worst day of my life ultimately led me to a better path than I might otherwise have found. The woman who seemed so cold when I first met her turned out to have the warmest heart expressed not through easy affection, but through unwavering commitment and thoughtful action. The greatest inheritance Aunt Eleanor left me was not the mansion or the money. It was the understanding that true family is built on choices made daily, on showing up consistently, on valuing someone enough to invest in their future. Sometimes the people who leave us make room for the ones who should have been there all along. Have you ever had someone unexpected step in and change your life when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about finding family in unexpected places. And remember, sharing these stories helps others who might be going through similar situations right now. Thank you for listening, and I hope your family, whether by blood or by choice, brings you the strength and support you deserve.